to find yourself, pushed beyond your tolerance at some point and then blurt out something stupid generated by the resentment you feel at being oppressed without a voice for so long.
Oh, the oppression. Fucking, why does it always come down to like, if only we could say the N-word. I've been so oppressed in Canada. Compelled speech. Big Brother is controlling me. 1987. Why can't I say it? Tucker Carlson tells Jordan Peterson his soul was at stake if he used correct gender pronouns. What?
If you have
I love that it goes to resting, Tucker face, just immediately. Like, all the time. I don't know how no one who's in the same room as him has never done this. Like, I would reach over, like, I can do it to Alex Jones here. Almost. And then just do that. He'd have to even be like, oh, thank you. Yeah, this is a lot better.
It's a sin to not.
Also, why are you always so horrid? I like, Jordan Peterson has just like resting horrid face. He's always so unpleasant. Like, I can't imagine being around this man all the time. I feel very sad for your wife. Like, it's just gonna be like, all the worst parts of the world are present in you, woman.
It's not appropriate, especially in a free society.
Thanks, Karen.
And so,
but what if you find yourself, as so many do, and you just described it well, in a position where you could lose everything if you do say it? Are you still, do you think, obligated to say it?
Well, people asked me why I was willing to speak out about the matters I did speak out in Canada. And for me, it was a matter of being more afraid of the alternative. The Canadian government put forward a piece of legislation that compelled speech, essentially, that required people on the pain of punishment by law to use pronouns that...
He's still lying about this? This has been so thoroughly debunked by now. I thought at least he would have changed the narrative. Wow. When wrong, double down. When called out, double down again, it would seem. Okay, so if you haven't heard, I've already explained it earlier in the show, but I'll explain it again. The reason this man, Jordan Peterson, is famous now is because in Canada, he opposed a bill which would include trans people into people who can be protected against hate speech in this country. It had nothing to do with pronouns and limiting your ability to use them. It was entirely about hate speech. Specifically, it was about adding them to a provision that included acts of genocide as well. So it was so far past the extreme. He, at the time, though, he had already had this YouTube channel. He had a ton of uploads. He usually like uploaded speeches and his class activities and stuff like that. But the right and the centrists and some of the libs even, I guess, what do you consider Sam Harris? He's kind of a 1350 style race realist, eugenicist, measuring skulls kind of guy. But anyways, that was the whole deal. And obviously Jordan Peterson at the time was like, they're going to compel me if I say Z or Zer. I can't say Z or Zer anymore.
The identity politics folks were what would you call promoting. And I guess that was the hill I...
Yeah, sorry. Friend B. Comrade is right. It actually includes gender. It doesn't even specify trans people, but includes gender in reasons that you cannot discriminate for purposes of hate speech in Canada. It's not about whether or not you have to use proper pronouns in schools and stuff like that.
I chose to die on because I felt that it was absolutely inappropriate move on the political front to compel speech of any sort.
And by the way, for like the overwhelming majority of trans people that I have the absolute pleasure of interacting with, it's extremely rare that I've been asked to use neutral pronouns. When I have been, it was kind of neat. I was like, this is fun. I like, you get to play with language. I get to like, train myself. You're obviously forgiven as a cis person. At least I have been, and I think it's completely fair to forgive others if they're having a little bit trouble at first getting the pattern of those neutral pronouns because it's the first time they've used it. But like, I don't get people who are so anti-neo pronouns. Like, fucking language is made up. It's just sounds. It's just sounds coming out of my voice, and those sounds, when you hear them, all of a sudden you take that in, you process it, your mind recognizes a pattern, and then you're like, orange. Like, that's how this entire thing works. So people want to add new sounds to that. It's just more words. Like, I don't understand where the problem comes in. But even then, you're very rarely being asked to politely use someone's neopronouns. Oftentimes, it may be they, them, it may be she, her. When you think naturally, it should be he, him, or something like that. But it's not a big ask. It's such a like just a human decency thing. Like, that's it, right? Can you be a decent human being? Can you not be a complete and utter douche? Then okay, just call people what they want to be called. And you're not being compelled. You make this into this whole thing where it's like, oh my, I'm being persecuted. They're going to compel speech. It's basically the end of free speech in this country. Like, no zero people have gone to jail. That's the reason it's also infuriating that he's still doubling down on this. 0 people in Canada have gone to jail for this.
Your Supreme Court forbade that, except in limited cases in commercial speech, I believe in 1942. I thought it was an inappropriate foray of the political sphere into the religious sphere, actually, because I think that voluntary speech is sacred. Your capacity to engage in voluntary speech is sacred. And so I objected. The reason I objected was not so much a consequence of any courage on my part, but because I was more afraid of the alternative. So and this is something I learned as a clinician too, is
goddamn, unironically doing one of those like full on, like, what's your greatest weakness? Well, my greatest weakness is also my greatest strength.
Many people that I've seen were stuck in, as a clinician, were stuck in jobs they found unrewarding, and that was eating away at their spirit, day after day. And they put off having to make that articulated and clear, because then they'd have to update their CV and look at the inadequacies of their background training and put themselves on the job market. It's a real pain, but the alternative is to while away the decades at a job that kills your soul. And that happens bit by bit, and so it's not very dramatic, but over the long run, it's hell. And so, if you have...
How can you say a sentence like that out, that out loud, and still be such a pro-capitalist? Like, I totally agree with you, Jordan Peterson. It can be. I've worked so many shitty jobs in my life. I've worked construction. I've worked as a dishwasher in a restaurant. Like these fucking, high-intensity, grueling, monotonous jobs. It can actually absolutely be hell on earth. I completely agree. Shouldn't we improve people's conditions then? Instead of just telling them clean up your room? Like, that's the biggest problem with all this.
Something to say and you're not saying it, then as far as I'm concerned, you're just storing up some hell for later and for more people and maybe for your children. So it's not... Things that aren't good don't go away because you ignore them. They just get worse, generally speaking. You hide things, they grow, and you shrink. And so sometimes...
Is he reading something? What is going on? Why does he keep... Like, what? I don't understand. And also, the fucking... Every single time Jordan Peterson gets exceptionally, emotional about something, I can just see... I can envision and feel and empathize why people on the right think of this man as a dad, like daddy, right? It's like, he's not just... very, very passionate about young men and developing their success and curating them into strong, noble men. It's just, he's emotional as well. He takes this so seriously. He cares so deeply about vilifying trans people. It's a very emotional part of his life.
You can pick your poison. That's what you've got. And I would say, pick the poison that's in accordance with your conscience. If 100 teachers across the United States stood up like Rossi did, the incursion of critical race theory into the curricula of private schools, let's say, to be specific, would stop. But that isn't going to happen. And Rossi decided he would speak out because increasingly he didn't he didn't like what was happening to the students in the school.
I have absolutely zero interest in mocking whatever it is happening to Jordan Peterson right now. I'm not entirely sure, but it's like his speech patterns seem exceptionally different from what he used to do. I am not sure why he's staring at the ground or what is going on, or why there's these strange pauses in his inflection. So whatever that is, that's nothing that I really have an interest in mocking. At the same time, like, as long as people like Tucker Carlson are going to keep platforming him on these monstrously huge shows, it needs to be examined and called out for exactly what he's saying. Like, the content of his words is still horrible, horrifying, and completely made up. The baffling thing about this is he's just lying to you. He's not only lying to Tucker Carlson, but he's lying to every single person who still buys this weird story that he is somehow this noble person standing up for free speech. He's like, I don't care about vilifying trans people. This, to me, it's a far greater battle. This is honestly about censorship, about whether or not they are trying to compel Canadian speech by adding gender to the things that could qualify you for hate speech. That's it.
So what you're saying is there aren't 100 courageous teachers with integrity in the entire United States, which I think is the most depressing thing I've heard in a long time. But I think you're probably right.
I wouldn't say that exactly. Well, I wouldn't say that exactly because of what we already talked about. You know, you pay an inordinate price for this.
Yes.
But the price isn't, if things are tilting in a direction that isn't appropriate, the price isn't escapable. It's already there. It's already happening. And by avoiding confronting it, in all likelihood, you're just going to make it worse.
Yes.
I mean, that's one way of looking at it. So, and I think people have to consult their own conscience and decide, you know, do you have something to say that you're not saying? And then you have to be very careful about it. You have to get your arguments. You have to marshal your arguments. But I would also say it's better to do it thoughtfully and carefully and voluntarily than to find yourself, you know, pushed beyond your tolerance at some point and then blurt out something stupid generated by the resentment you feel at being oppressed without a voice for so long.
Oh, the oppression. Fucking, why does it always come down to, like, if only we could say the N-word? I've been so oppressed in Canada. Compelled speech. Big Brother is controlling me. 1987. Why can't I say it?
And then you're really in trouble because, you know, you've said something extreme and you're going to definitely get pilloried for it at that point.
That's exactly right.
So,
and that's nicely put. Let me ask you one final question, just since we are talking about your life, which intersects with these ideas at so many turns. You made your decision 2016 not to say what the government of Canada was prepared to force you.
You made your decision to publicly come out as a bigot. That's all that happened. That's, no matter how you want to spin the narrative, that's it. That's Jordan Peterson, the entire fiasco summarized. That's all that happens. He's famous for being like, actually, I have some pretty archaic views. That's all there is. Like, holy shit.
You decided, I can't do that. It violates my conscience. My soul's at stake. I'm not doing it. Looking back on that decision 5 years later, your life is completely different from what it was. Are you happy that you made that decision? Was it worth it?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm happy that I made the decision. I wouldn't say that my life has been particularly happy over the last 5 years. It's been stressful beyond comprehension for a variety of reasons. And I would say being pilloried on a regular basis publicly is definitely part of that. But you know, you make your decisions in life, and I decided when I was very young, I'm in my mid-20s, that I was going to say what I believed and see what happened. I talked to you earlier in the talk about adventure, you know, about the adventure of truth, and I don't think I'm happy about what has happened, and I certainly have dragged my family through a fair share of, well, both hell and also incomprehensible opportunity. It's expanded our lives in both directions to a tremendous degree. But it's certainly been an adventure. It's not been dull. And I don't believe that it was a mistake.
Like, I'll just say this, like it's absolutely heart-wrenching, and the kind of things that someone like Jordan Peterson had to go through in terms of like your wife getting very, very sick, thinking that she might die, the drug addiction that ensued from that. I don't think there's any comedy in any of that, and I don't think, like, I know a lot of people on the left were really quick to mock him for those. I think, and I have a lot more interest in mocking Jordan Peterson for what he's doing here, because like he's still doing the same horrible things. Like, you might not wish something as bad as that to happen to somebody else, but he is actively vilifying trans people and making their lives so much harder by doing that on the national stage, by going on Tucker Carlson and acting like he's some warrior for free speech when he's just a bigot. That's it. He's lying about it. He's lying about the reasons for it. It's completely fabricated. It's like a nonsense problem that he's come up with his head. And okay, like, if you want to come forward publicly and be like, I definitely have some very archaic views about the trans community, then that's one thing. But to then say that this is not a matter of that, it has nothing to do with that, this is about compelled speech, well, then why is it that everything else that Jordan Peterson talks about are completely wrapped in with this whole modern day transphobia, like biological essentialism, trans children being completely and utterly off base on that, trying to talk about how the science is conclusive in certain areas when it points decidedly in the other direction in the results that he'll give you. Like, all of that shit, all of it, it's because he's just a fucking bigot. He's not a free speech warrior. He's not saving the earth. He's not doing anything. He's a fucking bigot. That's all there is to it. Let me ask you one final question, just since we were talking about your life, which intersects with these ideas at so many turns. You made your decision, 26, not to say what the government of Canada was prepared to force you to say. You decided, I can't do that. It violates my conscience. My soul's at stake. I'm not doing it. Looking back on that decision 5 years later, your life is completely different from what it was. My soul's at stake. And, like, obviously, it's because it's about free speech, all right? I should have the right to say the N-word at all times. Like, free speech, because we've been talking about this a lot today, whether it's the quartering, whether it's Tucker Carlson, the really important thing about freedom of speech is if you want absolute freedom, like 100% unadulterated freedom, just the libertarian dream come to life manifest, no treading on anyone, then you have a right to go stab your neighbor in the face. Like, that's essentially what you're allowed to do. Like, that's freedom, brother. Are you going to take that away from me? Do I not have, what is this, fucking some kind of communist dystopia? I'm not allowed to just walk up to my neighbor, punch him in the balls? I can't do that? Oh, okay, so then we as a society have decided that there are some limits to freedom, right? That we should have that. And we've also decided what and what is not acceptable in this day and age. Now, you still have a right, and I think you should have this forever, to think these thoughts, to say these thoughts in private. But guess what? When you're in public around other people, your freedom of speech can limit the freedom of speech of other people. If you're coming out into public and you're screaming the N-word at people, yeah, if you happen to be like I was going to say if you're black, but I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would be just, Twitch is limiting my free speech. Stream being really sus right now. Is it back? Am I back?
Hey, do you like movies? Do you like Serfs? Do you want movies and Serfs watching the movies? So then come over to the new channels. It's the Serfs cinema. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, you know, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like, just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks, why do older generations believe the things they believe? One of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our gods, I'm Raft and Xander Corvus. We shall build golden idols in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker. Our soft, spongy flesh is yours to command. To our lords, Evan Nudie, Trevor R., Alexander Thaler, Ryan Lubin, Bisexual Black Gamer, Toe Fox, and Jeffrey Lamb, we proudly carry your sigils onto the battlefield. And to our Knights of the Round Table, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Timothy Hart, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophagic, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, Callie Kotka, The Great Pudini, Von Janny, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Inclosen, J. Fraser Cartwright, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Nicholas Marks, Jopi, Josh Mickelson, Melissa Murphy, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, and Constance Joyce Lacheris. We tip our cap and lift our mug and salute you.